Good evening, everyone. Might just welcome you to the CIPR this lovely afternoon, or early evening. I'm sure some of you are wishing we relocated to the park. I'd just like to say there's not any fire alarms or anything due to go off, so if you hear anything, then follow Kai. Who knows where to go. We've got a hashtag for this evening's event, which is on there. Hashtag CIPR, mental health, diversity and iprovision C, so feel free. Before we get started, we've actually got a colleague here from the CIPR who would like to just say a few words on behalf of the CIPR's benevolent fund. So can I ask you to say hello to Annette Spencer?
Thanks, Alex. Well, good evening, and thank you all for coming, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Annette Spencer, and I'm a trustee and the vice chair of iprovision. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to kind of introduce this evening's discussion on championing talking about mental difference. That's probably the easier way to do it, because it's part of Mental Health Awareness Week. And I'm going to explain in a minute why we think that's quite important to iprovision. So iprovision is the benevolent fund for the PR profession. So for over 50 years now, we have provided financial support for past and present CIPR members when they find themselves in hardship. Quite often the causes are illness, bereavement, relationship breakdown, obviously redundancy. There can be all kinds of reasons why people of all ages find themselves needing help. More recently, we've also started looking at how we could develop a programme on wellbeing and mental resilience. And the reason for that is because we observed that for many of our beneficiaries, mental health issues, particularly stress and depression, were contributing to what was causing their hardship. So sometimes it was part of the cause, often it was also a consequence of the fact that they found themselves in difficulties. So we wanted to look at a practical way that we could help people, give them some practical support, potentially prevent problems before they started, but also be able to give beneficiaries some support if they were already in that situation. You hopefully found on your chairs some details of the kind of seminar programme that we've now introduced. And so when we were asked if we could help and support with this evening's event, we felt it was a natural next step. And we're delighted to be able to join with the Diversity and Inclusion Forum in being able to support this evening's event. So really, I'm here just to kind of explain who we are and why we are involved. Happy to talk to you any of you afterwards, but obviously the main reason we're here is to talk about this important subject and hear from the speakers. So Alex, I'll hand back to you. Thank you very much.
So having said that, I think the next thing we're going to do is watch a very short video, is that right?
Yeah.
So on mental health and PR.
I think poor mental health is very prevalent in PR. I don't know whether it's necessarily rife compared to other industries, but I think the comparison between how much it's talked about and how much it exists, I think there's a gulf.
I think mental health issues and depression are very rife in PR. I think it's very hidden, but I am almost certain as I can be that there's a big issue.
Burnout is when stress is at its worst, basically. That's when people have to stop. It's mental, it's physical, it's emotional. It affects them in every area of their life. And it's not just while they're at work, it's when they're at home as well. So they lose confidence, they feel that they can't function anymore, and they basically have to stop.
I don't believe it's good for anyone's mental health to be under a lot of pressure, even if your work generally involves it.
Big organisations very often do have things in place like occupational health or EAP programmes or even a counsellor on site. But for smaller organisations, they have to try I think, and have a preventative procedure in place. So managers should be alert to employees' behaviours. You know, the clues will be there, that there'll be poor performance, there'll be people taking long periods off sick. You know, they need to communicate with their employees.
If the company has a very open policy of dealing with mental health, and not just in a lip service way, but an actual action plan, then I think I would be comfortable talking to someone. I think if you don't address this, the long-term harm that it does to your company, to the people in your company, far outweighs the potential short-term uncomfortableness of addressing it.
First of all, they start off being pressured, and then the pressure seems to build up to stress. And if that is left unchecked for lengthy periods of time, and they're feeling more and more under pressure, then it will become a serious issue.
Things started to snowball towards the end of my 20s, from 29, 30. I was signed off work with anxiety, stress and depression. I was off work for about 3 months at that time, and that's when my drinking started to really probably affect my work quite a lot. I eventually sent myself to rehab. I was very lucky enough to be able to go away for a month and get treated properly, and really address all the problems that I guess the alcohol was fueling.
You go through things in your life which are stressful, and you might get depressed about certain things. My form of depression is more of an ongoing thing. It comes and goes, but it comes and goes very regularly. And I've just personally learned to deal with that.
As regards individuals, they need to become much more self-aware. So do they have any of the mental or physical, symptoms that might indicate that they're seriously stressed? Are they dreading going to work? Do they feel low when they come back from work? All of those kind of things. So they need to get help, whether it's seeing their HR manager, if there is one, or seeing a GP or a counsellor.
The sobriety is one day at a time, but it's something I've got a handle on, and I know that I can't drink in the same way that people who have peanut allergy can't have a Snickers, really. It's quite binary. As far as the mental health aspect goes, I think that's something that will always be part and parcel of me, really. And I address it by just acknowledging that it's there and being aware of what the triggers might be.
It's managing your own time, your own resources, so that you are still doing all that's required of you, just in maybe a different type of way. So, for example, I might work odd hours. A lot of people who are suffering from depression, for example, find it really tough getting up in the morning, not because they're lazy, but because they get exhausted. And to be able to adjust your working day around that would be really important. Like I say, I can, but in most companies that's not an option yet anyway.
No longer are weekends and evenings sacrosanct. It's almost expected, especially in an industry like PR, that people are on call 24/7.
The more it's talked about, the more it becomes acceptable, the more it becomes just part of everyday managing a business. And if we can get to that stage, then I think this hidden issue is likely to be on the way to being solved,
I think it sounds really simple, and I know it's not, but I think just encouraging people to talk about it is the best thing that anyone can do.
Thank you. That was interesting. As it happens, I did myself see a survey, I think it was published last week, by the BBC.
So where has PR industry gone?
BBC's 5 Live, where it was saying that 55% of people in Britain would not tell a colleague if they were experiencing a mental health problem. I don't know how that stacks up to the kind of figures that you might be aware of, but it still seems to me that although I think things have got a lot better, that there's still quite a way to go. Anyway, I will introduce somebody who knows a lot more about this than I do. So our first speaker is Alison Kerry, who for the last 10 years has been leading the Minds and media team, and done some fantastic work in helping the media to talk about mental health in a way that hopefully reduces stigma rather than makes it worse. So I think I think we've all seen some evidence of that. And her team is also leads the Mind Media Awards, which I've personally tried to get a couple of clients to help win, but failed miserably. Very high standards. And before that, Alison worked with the London Ambulance Service and Passenger Focus, Network Rail, so she certainly knows this stuff. So I'll stop talking and hand over. Thank you.
I might just place that down.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that all right? So first of happy Mental Health Awareness Week, everybody. That's what we like to say at Mind. It's been fantastic this week. We've been very busy, but I really was very passionate about coming here tonight and wanting to talk to you all about this. So I wanted to make sure I had time to come along. But it's been great this week. We've seen a huge amount of coverage for mental health, probably more so than ever before. And to me, it really feels as though we're finally starting to sort of reach that tipping point and really starting to change the way that we all think and act and talk about mental health. And I hope that that's something that you're all feeling as well, because that's why you're here tonight. So, mental health has for too long, I think, been in the shadows and been something that we feel we have to be secretive about, that we have to ignore or be ashamed about. And having been at Mind for 10 years, I've certainly seen a huge step change in how we're now all thinking about mental health. We're now seeing more and more people in the public eye talking about mental health and their own experiences. I'm sure you all saw Prince Harry just a week or so ago speaking about having counselling. I mean, I couldn't have dreamt of that when I first started at Mind, so I think that's been phenomenal. And then just this morning we've had people like Ricky Hatton, the boxer, on Good Morning Britain, talking about his depression, Lady Gaga, all these different characters and people from all walks of life talking about it. And I think that that's one of the ways that we're really going to change attitudes. So for me, there's definitely a sense that we can't ignore this anymore, and that means that workplaces can't ignore it either. So 1 in 4 people will experience a mental health problem. I'm sure you've all heard this stat many times, because we've been having it in our key messages now for a really long time. But that means that every single family, every single friendship group, and every single workplace, you will all know somebody. If it's not yourself, it's going to be someone that you know, that you're close to, that has a mental health problem. And that could be anything from depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia. There's a huge spectrum of mental health problems. So we can all expect to come across mental health in the workplace. And we need to think about the different ways that we might come across that. So it might be whether, as we saw in the film there, it was talking about the impact of really demanding workload on your own mental health. It might be that you've got concerns about somebody you're working with, a colleague, a peer, or it might be that you're having to respond if a direct report comes to you and you're their line manager and they're telling you that they are struggling with their own mental health. So it's up to every single business, every single organisation needs to be promoting good workplace wellbeing for all of their staff. At Mind, we recently this year we introduced the very first Workplace Wellbeing Index, and this is a benchmark where we assess policies and practice that organisations have around mental health at work. It was the first time that we've done this. We hope that our aspiration is that this will become a bit like the Stonewall Index for employers. We want it to be something that companies aspire to be a part of, to understand and to see where they fit in terms of their policies and practice around mental health. Now, as part of that, getting your ranking in that index, you have to, as an organisation, undertake a staff survey so that we can understand the employee's perspective about how their company is doing. And I think it's probably one of the biggest surveys that's ever happened of employees' mental health. 15,000 members of staff took part in that survey, so it's really robust research that we've got back. And we found that about 60% of employees said that their mental health at the moment was actually good, or fairly good, which that's, pretty good, more than half. But of those that said their mental health was poor, about 80% of those had said that work was the contributory factor to why their mental health was poor. So we know that work plays a huge role in our health and well-being. Now, in the film, it talks about stress. Obviously, stress is a very common experience in itself. It's not a diagnosis of a mental health problem. Stress can actually be very good for us. It can fuel us. It can help us meet that deadline. It can give us that adrenaline boost. And actually, stress to some degree when stress does reach that overwhelming level, it can start to become bad for your mental health. So if stress has got so bad that you're experiencing it for enduring periods of time, it's affecting you, you can't sleep, you're exhausted, you can't concentrate, starting to question your own self-esteem, confidence, it's at that point that you may well be experiencing anxiety or depression, and perhaps it's something more serious. Now, it was interesting that last year, PR was found to be one of the top 10 most stressful industries to work in. I think it ranked number 6 in that particular list. And we have a saying in my team, which we have to remind ourselves of at times, which is that we're doing PR, not ER. So we are not saving lives. It can feel like that at times. It can, especially when we're a charity, we want to do our very best, and we're all very passionate. But when you're juggling lots of deadlines and you've got the Daily Mail on the phone and there's a crisis situation, it can feel pretty stressful. And I think that can be one of the reasons why PR ranks so highly in that particular list. We really need to think all the time about the huge responsibility that you have when you work in PR, because you're holding the reputation of your organisation or several organisations perhaps in your hands, and what you say and how you manage situations can have very public consequences. So just thinking about things like United Airlines and Pepsi recently, those people that were working in PR or marketing behind the scenes, they were probably feeling quite stressed. I'm sure they were feeling quite stressed afterwards. So you do have a huge amount of responsibility, and in a time where the media is always on, and the news and social media, and so many commentators now, it's all very public, and you feel like you need to be tuned in all the time. You never seem to be off, and I think that also contributes to this feeling of stress and pressure. Our work's also very unpredictable. So you might spend a lot of time, it's been weeks and weeks planning a campaign, but then a different news story comes along and it literally trumps you on the front pages because you plan and you've worked on all this stuff and then it's just gone in a moment. It's very disappointing. And then there's a lot of uncertainty because you've got clients potentially who take their business away, or your pitch, you work on a pitch and it's not successful. So it's kind of unlike some other businesses for the amount of unpredictability. And it can be hard to switch off. And personally, I tend to find that even if I'm at home and I'm watching EastEnders or I'm a celebrity or all the very highbrow viewing that I have, I'm also thinking about mental health. So I'm thinking, oh, this storyline with these characters about postpartum psychosis, what can mine do to make the most of that? Or this celebrity in the jungle has talked about their experience of depression, maybe we could reach out to them and talk about working with them. So I'm constantly on, even if I'm watching something enjoyable. So you never quite stop. The other side of this is when you're a manager and an employee perhaps comes to you and discloses a mental health problem. And as you might expect at Mind, I think probably about 50-60% of our workforce have mental health problems, so this is a very common experience. But perhaps other workplaces, perhaps people don't have that same kind of open culture. But if someone does come to you and talks about their mental health, how many people would say that they would feel comfortable, that they would know what to say or what to do in that situation? You can see a mix of heads nodding and chin. So a lot of companies will say that they can't afford to introduce ways of working that accommodate mental health, and that they're worried it might be expensive, and then line managers are a bit daunted about what to say, they might be intimidated, you might think, God, what if I say something and I get it wrong, or upset someone, and they're very worried about that, and rightly, worried about that. But it's responsibility of the whole company to actually tackle the culture and to change that culture to one that's more positive and more open, and to create an environment where staff feel that they're valued and that they're really well supported. It's kind of to me it's a no-brainer. Why would you not want your staff to feel supported? Lots of PR companies are doing this already, and sometimes I think they're doing some quite positive things and maybe quite small things that they don't necessarily recognise in a mental health context, but they are doing some positive things. So whether it's having nice social activities, or they have appraisals for their staff, and they set objectives, so people are really clear about their expectations. They might have really good forms of open communication, but sometimes perhaps they don't realise that actually they're already taking some quite positive steps. I've got another stat for you that I did want to share, so I thought it was quite interesting. Was another piece of research that mine did a couple of years ago. We found that 95% of employees who take time off because of stress actually prefer to give a different reason. They prefer to lie than to say why they were really upset. So they would rather say they had an upset stomach. They'd rather talk about diarrhea than talk about stress. Like, they would not want to reveal that to their employer. And that's because they fear being judged, that they fear that they'll appear weak or that they're less competent than their colleagues. And that's the thing that we need to change. So we need to change it and start a conversation about mental health. And if someone discloses that they have a mental health problem to you, my tips would be just be human about it. You know, listen, be understanding and don't judge. I think listening and asking what you can do to be supportive, not, you know, running to the answer yourself, but actually asking the question is really important. Some tips, things that we would suggest: make sure you have regular catch-ups with your direct reports. Try to give them some options. Maybe they would find it easier to come in after the rush hour. If someone's experiencing anxiety on public transport, could you consider that they could come in later in the day? Could they work from home? Think about small, reasonable things that you could do. So it doesn't have to be hugely expensive. Something, again, that we recommended that we have at Mind, we have something called a wellness action plan. I don't know if anyone's ever heard of that. So it's a kind of advanced directive about your mental health. Now, at Mind, everybody has one. It doesn't matter if you have a mental health problem or not, because we recognise that work can be stressful. So everyone will have this plan, and you might write down things that your boss could look out for when you're feeling under pressure. Little things that they could do to help you feel supported. And then everyone can say for themselves what they would find useful. So in my team, one of my colleagues, she will say, if I'm really stressed, I'll forget to go out for lunch, or it would be great if you bought me a tuna sandwich, because that's my favourite sort of sandwich. But it's just literally small little things like that that show that you care. You go make them a cup of tea, you make sure they're going out for breaks. Things like, another colleague, they might say, I'm usually really bubbly and loud, but when I go really quiet and withdrawn, that's when you probably need to ask me if I'm doing okay today. So it can be quite helpful, and it can also be a tool to start a conversation about mental health with your staff, especially if you feel like you don't quite know where to start. So I think that's quite a useful thing that organisations could try to have. Yeah, so overall I think the message is we can't afford not to prioritise mental health anymore. We're living in an age where mental health is top of the news agenda, thankfully, finally. And I think all businesses really need to prioritise it, because why would you not want to be part of that?
Thank you very much. That was, I've got a few tips there I'll be using. Our next speaker has spent over 20 years working in global HR, resourcing, technology, transformation, implementation and leadership.
Sorry.
For the last 6 years of that 20 years, Colin was at G4S as the group head of resourcing and HR, which I didn't know this, is the world's second largest private sector employer, with over 600,000 employees. So that's quite a big HR job. He was responsible for recruiting over 220,000 people a year. Wow, okay. And in 2016, you wrote an article in People Management magazine about your war on OCD. I'm sure you'll tell us a bit more about that. That article then led to the creation of the Mental Health in Business LinkedIn group, which is very active. And now I don't quite know what this means. I'm hoping you'll explain this. But the overt and covert questioning community on one line, and a lot of other opportunities to talk and think about mental health in the workplace. And Colin also developed something called the Hero Mental Health Readiness and Enable Mental Difference Indexes, rather than tools, models, and is a patron of the Sure Mind Foundation. So before I go on. No, I better introduce Colin, who can tell you all about those things in a much more exciting way than I can. So,
thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So, before I just do a bit more of an intro about myself, I like to start with a little activity. I like to get the room buzzing. I was told that you're a really lively bunch. Yeah? So this is really helpful actually. It steers kind of where we go with part of the presentation. So I did ask that we had pads and we had pens. Would you kindly grab a piece of paper each, please, and a pen? And you know what you're going to do. I'm going to say a word in a minute, and I'm going to give you about 5 seconds to write the first thing that comes down into your head on the piece of paper. And I need you to fold it into a paper aeroplane and throw it at my head. Yeah? For all those that don't know how to or feel that they can't do a paper aeroplane, then I'll accept a comet, which is just a screwed up roll of paper. The reason I do this is because I don't want to track back who wrote what, because I want you to be really, really honest. I want to get a flavour for the understanding of the language that has been used and might be used around this subject. And I'm going to say a word in a minute, and I want you to write it down very quickly. And the first thing that comes to your head, it could be a negative, it could be a positive, but it's probably the stuff that you might have associated with this word as you were growing up, and you might still associate it with it now. So, when I say the word, you've got 5 seconds, I will count it down. I want you to write, fold that plane, make the comment, throw it at me, and then I'll probably turn my back because I can see who's thrown certain ones. I don't want to try. I'm going to read some of them out after we've done that. But please be really, really honest. So the word is obviously mental. So quick, 5 seconds, write down the first thing that you probably grew up thinking about that word. It could be negative, it can be positive. What traditionally did you associate with that word? Right, okay, so I've got someone wants to throw something now, so I'm just going to look away a bit. The cleaners hate me for doing this. So I've got some planes. Brilliant. Fantastic. Good shot. No, actually, brilliant. Right, a bit of language, but crazy.
This is a really good one.
Crazy. There's a prize for who hits me in the head. Brilliant. So we've got the word crazy. Fantastic. What else have we got here? Crazy. Okay, there's a pattern for me. Notice I'm looking at them. I'm going to get a prize for the best plane. Nuts. Yep. A few more. Crazy and strange. Okay, so I'm going to open up one of the comments. Well, comment. Scary. Okay, so some very, very negative words. Some words that I would maybe suggest are associated with stigma. Yeah? Some words that are associated with the reason why people don't want to necessarily open up and talk about the fact that they have a mental health issue. Yes? Yeah? Some of those words might be brought forward into a recruitment process. So yes, I did used to recruit, not personally, but I managed the strategy for it, a lot of people a year. Yeah? And it's some of these words that you might associate with unconscious bias. Okay? So what I like to do is kind of change the language a bit, and we'll do that as we go through. So thank you ever so much for doing that. I will take responsibility to tidy up at the end, don't worry. So this is me, 20 years in resourcing, got into a really, really senior and big role at G4S. It is the second largest private employer in the world. It's huge, 130 countries, 630,000 employees. And I was the, not just recruitment, it was to managing all the HR systems strategy across the globe as well. So, won lots of awards, built lots of advanced technologies, career centres, which then ultimately sold on to loads of other companies, saved tens of millions of pounds per annum as a result of what I was putting in. And since leaving G4S, I then went into consultancy for resourcing strategy and HR technology transformation, and I've worked with AXA, Whitbread, Imosat, Horace Cole, and a few others. Yeah. So, the reason I'm telling you this is because there's a bit of a but coming. Okay, and I'll move on to that in a minute. Let's talk about this subject matter. I've broken it down into 3 areas. So, mental health. We've all got mental health. We've got mental health, physical health, sexual health, and it can be positive, it can be negative. Okay, we can all influence that. We've then got mental illness, which is categorised as an illness or disorder relating to the mind. Then I started using some phraseology when I opened up. It was August 2016, and I went on a kind of a diversification journey to move away from consulting in recruitment and resourcing and HR tech into mental wellbeing. And I just didn't like the phraseologies that were there. So I always grew up, certainly through G4S, working with an amazing woman called Teresa White, who just used to talk about difference, and difference was good. So I thought, well, mental difference is a little bit of a softer, and something I'm more comfortable talking about. So I started talking about mental difference. And this is the differences that one has got as a consequence or despite of mental ill health. Okay? And these are things I like to celebrate. But we did say we would talk about how mental illness affects someone. And I'm going to run through my story and my journey. And just give you a little bit of flavour of what it's like to have a mental illness, and in this case, OCD. So I was born with OCD. The front part of my brain doesn't work as it should, and basically everybody has thoughts. So if you've watched a cop show and someone's used a knife, I've got a knife there, someone's used a knife and they've killed someone with it. If you were to see a sharp knife, anyone, you might think, oh, I can use that. Someone without OCD, just gone. It doesn't even trigger. Someone with OCD, me, I would go, I've just thought about potentially killing someone. Oh my God, what if I could? And then I'd go into a massive spiral and panic, trying to convince myself I wasn't capable of doing it. Okay, so that is how my brain reacts very differently to some of the natural thoughts that people have. So, 10 years old, the Sun newspaper, perhaps related, Sun newspaper did a story back in the 80s about the new AIDS epidemic. I was 10 years old at primary school, third year of 4, and I started panicking that I was potentially going to die of HIV and AIDS at 10. And it was at that point I should have realised that that wasn't quite right, but the education within schools, and certainly back then, it's not there, so, you know, this is something that I had to start dealing with. I remember vividly the mushroom man came in, the fun guy to be with. You know, sorry, poor Joe. He showed us all these different funguses and mushrooms and things. Whilst everyone was getting stuck in, I was the one thinking, touch that, I might transfer this poison, because he did say at the very start, which got me going, that there's no cure, there's no antidote for certain fungus. You should never put it in your mouth. So that was me thinking, I touched that, and if I then put that onto a door handle, and then someone ingests it and they die, then I'm going to be implicated, I'm going to go to prison for the rest of my life. So that's how these things start to spiral out of control. I had to give up biology at college. I couldn't be around chemicals. I was the one walking out of the classroom, opening the doors with my elbows, going straight into the toilets and washing my hands in case I had got chemicals on my hands or on my bag or brushed against my leg and I was going to transfer it elsewhere. I had a bit of a tough time at Tesco's when I was on the checkouts, when I was a young lad, especially when I put the bleach through and then the bananas came along. Because again, it was, well, hang on, if I've got a bit of bleach and I put it on the bananas and then someone eats that, they're going to ingest it. And, you know, so it was all catastrophes, catastrophizing about it. Really singling around me going to prison and it being the end of my life. I do remember, I think it was my dad or my mum said to me once, you know, you've got to be good, because if you commit a crime, you'll go to prison and you're never going to get a job. And you know, so this just resonated and this just stuck with me. So I've talked about the knife situation. Not the best when I'm standing next to a tube station, but this is an interesting one because most people would say, yeah, when I'm standing there waiting for the tube, I feel a little bit uncomfortable. Someone might push me, or you know, is it beckoning me over? Well, you know, with me, it's a little bit more advanced than that. I would think about, well, you know, what if I could? And then you go into a spiral. I can see you're absolutely shocked here, and you're heading for the exit really quick. Don't worry. No, the complete reverse of these thoughts is actually the truth. Florence Nightingale had OCD, so you know we're not all bad. Cuts, bruises. Going back to the original one, HIV, AIDS. I've kind of catastrophized throughout the years of dying of pretty much everything. Especially if I were to cut myself or graze myself, I'd be then thinking, well, okay, whatever I graze myself on, maybe someone else had done that beforehand, and then someone's transferred it to me. So you get a picture. This is how this is the brain of an OCD survivor, let's say, not sufferer. Oh, too far. So I got to a point at 32. So it started at 10, and I got to 32, and throughout that period of time, it was pretty dark. At times, it was very, 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 very challenging. I got to the point where I just thought, this is it. I just don't want this life anymore. I can't continue. And I had two choices. One, listen to what all of the psychotherapists had told me throughout my life of struggling with this, or do the other path, which doesn't bear thinking about. So I decided, that's it. I'm going to absolutely fight this. I've got nothing else that I can do. I'm going to take the fight to this. And what I was told to do, cognitive behavioural therapy, was very much a case of you've got to leave it there. You've got to acknowledge that you've got an illness. Barry Cohen, she was an amazing American psychotherapist. I had loads, but she was the one that really got me thinking right around there. She said that, your OCD is like your diabetes, and you've got it. Deal with it. You're not going to be able to get rid of it. It's with you. But what you can do is manage it and recognise that these thoughts are actually a symptom, and you need to take your medicine. And I'm going to tell you what your medicine is. And the medicine was to kind of leave it there and not engage with it, and go through the pain barrier, and ultimately I would start to retrain my brain that what I was panicking about wasn't necessarily the right thing. So what I did kind of around that was I got myself fit, because I was told that if you exercise and you get your physical health into great shape, then that gives you an opportunity to combat the mental health. I really struggle with this one because I do love the fried food, but I cut down and I try to eat more healthily. Try not to, we joked about it earlier, but try not to stay up too late, and try and rest. I did lots of relaxation exercises, and really felt miserable on this one. I do love my red wine. Friday nights and Saturday nights is where I kind of let myself down a bit with that. But you've got to have some enjoyment in your life, haven't you? But I really immersed myself in the CBT, and it was fascinating, because I don't know what it was I was panicking about, but it was after I was at the end of the bed crying my eyes out thinking I can't go on, and I said, this is it, next one that comes along, I'm going to do what Barry told me. So it came along, and I said resist it. I immersed myself in loads of other activities, and after about half an hour I started to come down a little bit. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, I would suggest, because my brain was forcing me to think about it, and I decided, no, I can't do that, I'm not going to. After about 2 hours, after digging the garden over and having conversations with my wife and just really distancing myself, I didn't know what it was that I was actually panicking about. It actually had kind of gone, which was really strange. And but then I took from that I'd run my 4-minute mile, and actually, for once, taken some medicine for this challenge and combated it, and I've beaten it. And my OCD is, in my mind, is a person. And every time it kind of flares up, it's like, I know who you are. Let's do this. So I've combated it. And every time since that point, when I was 32, they just got a little bit easier to manage, to the extent that I'd probably say I'm about 90-95% okay, and not much sets me off. But when it does, I can combat it quite quickly. And another thing I like to do is talk about it. So I like to come out, I like to talk to people, I like to listen to them, I like to share, and I'm just as thrilled as you are with all of this conversation that's going on around mental wellbeing, mental health, mental illness, because it's a real opportunity to show and know that you're not alone, and you can get better, and you can manage these situations. So, these are kind of some of the things, the symptoms that you associate with mental health. And this is where I'm going to start throwing stuff back to you now, the lively bunch that you've been billed at. Any more kind of symptoms in there that you would suggest? There was one mentioned in the video actually, which I'll throw up if no one else does.
Unhappiness?
Unhappiness, yes. Okay, any more? Yes.
What about hiding? Is
Hiding. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a consequence of the symptoms, isn't it? Yeah.
Substance abuse.
Substance abuse. Yeah. That's kind of trying to cope with the symptoms, isn't it? Yeah.
Inability to sleep.
Yes.
Grief.
Grief. Yeah. Dread was mentioned in the video. Dreading, waking up, going to work. They're all really negative, aren't they? Yeah. They're all really negative, and this is where because I'm in the heartland of PR and press. This is the message I'm kind of taking out. Is we use a lot of this language in a lot of the communication around this. We use a lot of the statistics that 30 billion is spent on supporting people with mental health and mental illness. We have a continual conversation around the downsides, the burdens that someone might be to their employer, the burden they are to UK PLC. And that whole language, for me, isn't really conducive for getting people to open up and talk more positively about it. We had our wonderful Piers Morgan say some delightful stuff about men needing to man up and this outpouring, etc., which kind of reverses the trend of positivity. It's really sad that we kind of lead on this negative stuff. So, wanted to kind of turn it around a bit and start looking at some of the positive sides. Certainly from my perspective, not associated with my OCD. And what I do when I write and I blog and speak is trying to have an alternative view to this. So there was an amazing stat, this one here at the bottom, by the Mental Health Foundation, that started talking about people with mental illness actually contribute 226 billion to UK GDP. Yes, they might cost 30 billion, but that's a 9 times multiple of positivity to negativity. We don't reach for that one first, do we? We go with the negative. So, thanks OCD, I absolutely attribute my illness to me having a solution frame. I'm a consultant. I was a consultant technically at G4S, going around the world and solving their problems. And because I've been solving problems of meteoric catastrophe since the age of 10, I trained my brain. I've exercised it into being able to solve things. I was at the do at the House of Lords, and the head of resourcing for Heathrow Terminal 4, the new runway 3, said, I've got a real problem. We're going to recruit 60,000 people for this. I was like, so I had 220,000, and I've been, panicking about killing people. So, this is for me. This has really helped me. It's given me a massive benefit. I can solve problems because I've been solving them all my life. Yay, expert proofreader. Not my own work though. This is what annoys me. Your brain tells you it's right. Okay? Who can't proofread their own work? Yeah, neither can I. But I can proofread everyone else's. I've been told I scare people with my attention to detail. So yeah, that is something that I attribute to having a mental illness. Risk radar, you absolutely want me in a risk workshop. I'm the one going down an extra layer. Yeah, so all the obvious ones, so oh yes, that door's something might fall off the door and hit me on the head. I'm thinking all kinds of different things. And of course in a risk workshop, we did a lot of them back at G4S, you say everything because that little minor thing might just be the one thing that you don't mitigate against, but that's the big thing that will happen. I've been told, and I believe this myself, very high moral compass, because I catastrophise about doing nasty things all the time and dying of bits and pieces, I try to be the best person I possibly can, and maybe overcompensate. I don't think it's fake, I think I generally am quite nice, but this is a personality characteristic of my illness. Obviously, orderly, okay, and the first thing people say is, all your tins lined up, Colin. No, but I do like a bit of order, and that goes with the attention to detail. And I've also covered this tonight as well, a contribution for GDP. So the reason I put that bit up the front was a little bit indulgent of, Colin's done this, and he's won awards, he's done everything there. Done all that, but the previous slides to this, I've been battling that as well. So the message is, you can still contribute. No matter what you're challenged with, you can still do brilliant stuff. And moving on, look at these two. Difference. I mean, sort of the height difference there. They're so different in so many different ways, physiologically and mentally, which is why they win. pretty much every event they go into, which is why marketing businesses covet them and want them to advertise their products and services, why brands want to associate with them. That's because they're different. So I'm different, they're different, but why is the mental side always so negative when their difference is so positive? Yeah, this is where I think we've got an opportunity to change the language. So, I'm not asking you to open up about mental health challenges or anything like that. I want to talk about difference. Maybe get some thoughts from the floor around the difference in your sector and what in your sector, what differences are in your sector that make it so great, make it so unique. Maybe some of the things that you might think you do differently and you do better than others. Just want to have a little bit of a conversation about that. Just to get you talking and thinking. So difference. Why are you different as a sector? Or what makes you different that maybe wanted you to go into PR or marketing?
I think the point you make about stress is that a lot of us would say, you know, we can't really fit.
Yeah, some positive stress.
And it's part of the, you know, if you've got a big media issue going and, you know, the phones are going and...
Do you enjoy that? Do you enjoy that adrenaline rush, yeah?
Well, I say me. I mean, I do up to a point, but then there is that kind of tipping point where, you know, if you're not prepared, you haven't got all the answers or you can't get the answers, then things start to become a little bit less fun.
Yeah.
You know, if you know, something else happens that means that, you know, another disaster comes along and you maybe you're juggling two and then you suddenly haven't got enough time or someone lets you down and then the fun kind of spirals out of control into just...
That's good. But they're positive differences, right? You know, you've got some resilience there. Yeah, you like a little bit of stretch, you like a little bit of excitement. Yeah, a bit of a challenge.
I think you do, and then I think you start to feel that if you don't respond in that way every time you're in that situation, that something's not quite right with you.
Yeah.
Rather than actually when you turn around, maybe you're managing 5 things that are quite stressful.
Mm.
So I think it can...
You can overdo it.
Yeah, you can, and I think you become nervous about people thinking you can't cope.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly that's MAT that I recognise.
Yeah, that's good. So something that drives you, if it drives you too far, then it might become problematic. Yeah? Thank you. Thank you very much. Anything else?
I think on the positive side, we always know what's going on in the news.
Yep.
And we become experts in the most random fields.
Yeah.
We know so much about so many different topics because usually our clients are so varied, which means that down the pub or meeting new people, we have no problem holding a conversation because we can find common ground with.
So that's a skill.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose then retention of knowledge, because with me, in a lot of situations, it goes in and goes out the other side, and I really, really have to get to know my domain knowledge inside out and back to front. Otherwise, I'll fall apart when I'm having conversations, meetings, pitches, and stuff like that. But if you're immersing yourself in the industry sector and you're retaining all that knowledge so you can then play it all back, that's a real good skill. That's what makes you different. Anything else? On the quiet side of the room. Yes,
I sort of feel like PR is all about narratives, and you know, if we work in PR, then we're sort of expert storytellers. And my sort of point of view is that if we're expert storytellers, then who best, you know, than us to tell, you know, stories on sort of mental health.
Absolutely, expert stories, creative. Yeah,
absolutely,
fantastic, articulate,
yeah.
Brilliant. So you're livened up now, look.
I think one of the skills that PR people do, I think we have a high level of empathy.
Yes.
We can put ourselves in the shoes of other people, and I think depending what area of PR you're in, you can bring that expertise to something to tell a story or to think, what does this person need to know or need to hear?
Brilliant.
You know, so I think that's something that is a soft skill that sometimes we are kind of not for, but it's an important skill as well.
Yeah, yeah. I'd like you to lead today and think about the differences that you bring to the party. Yeah, and you know, I've looked at it and I've gone through some dark times, but I've realised, you know what, there's some positives that have come out of that, and I can leverage that. This is where I talk to businesses and say, look, you know, technology organisations, and they'll admit that the developers and coders are on some form of spectrum. Okay, okay, and then you kind of look at their recruitment process, and they're not really conducive to people that are on the spectrum going through that process. And you're just like, come on, think differently, you know. What I like to encourage businesses to do is look at task orientation and skill sets and capabilities that are required, rather than this fit thing. Oh, they've got to fit into the organisation. It's like, really? I mean, surely they've got to be able to deliver brilliance and excellence, and if you have to change the organisation a bit to get them in there, isn't that the right thing to do? When there's a skill shortage, so data scientists at the moment, yeah, people are morphing themselves left, right and centre because you can't get them for love and money. So I think this frame around difference and mental difference, that's why I went down this mental difference route. I think it's a much more positive and palatable language that we can use. So let's get some more interaction. I have condensed this down a bit in time, and normally I'd feed them in quite, you know, nicely and talk about each individual. But I want to kind of just start having a bit of a conversation about what you should be looking for, what signs of mental health challenge or difference you maybe need to look at, look out for yourself, what can you potentially spot in others, if you spot them in yourself and spot them in others, the kind of things you can do, and then we'll finish off about what businesses might be able to do to support this. Let's have a little bit of an interaction session here. And I'm not going to give you all the answers and say, oh, you know, because I'm not a clinician. Some people say, you know, can you come and educate us on mental health? So no, because I'm not qualified to. And if I tell something wrong, I'm going to go home panicking about it. So don't let me do it, please. And that's where I'll hand it over to somebody else. So I'm not going to tell you the answers, but I'd like to have a bit of a debate around this. So what should we be looking out for? What should you look out for in yourself? Positives and negatives.
Change in your behaviour.
Yeah.
Change in sleep.
Sleep. Yeah.
I think when you get situations when you're really on the buzz, when you're really happy, something's really, something's making you really, for instance, you just launched a product and you're really on a high, then suddenly you drop.
Yeah, you've got to look out for the...
You've got to look, that's important to look out for the highs and the lows. It happens to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, no, fantastic. And yourself, yes?
Major life events, like serious life-changing events, so it can be just having a child or it could be bereavement.
Absolutely. Yeah, so postnatal depression is postnatal, right? You don't have it beforehand, have it afterwards. My wife's struggled with that on both children. We were much better at the second one because we were prepared for it, but we weren't prepared for the first one. But I suppose I kind of could help her because of what I'd been through. I'd come back to it, and then I made sure she saw the doctor, your counselling for it. Okay, what about looking? What can you do then if you spot a challenge in yourself? What can you do if you spot a challenge in someone else? What would you do?
I think part of that is just recognising it to begin with and accepting it. It's not change.
So accepting it that, yeah?
Not just running around it.
Yeah. Yeah, we've got lots of examples of that now.
Sometimes it's just going for a walk.
Yeah.
Going for a walk, and I say like, to get my head right.
Yeah.
And just get some fresh air, putting on my trainers and just walking.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you could be feeling really down and you walk into go for a coffee or whatever, and someone says, "Oh, how are you?" and gives you a nice smile. And those little things make a lot of difference.
Yeah, they're all common sense stuff. Yeah.
Also putting a name to it instead of thinking like, oh, I'm really sad and tired all the time. Like knowing where to look to figure out what that means. And if there's like something that's actually, you know, that always seems to point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's having that recognition that something's not quite right. Yeah. It's not quite normal. I don't like the word, but it's easy to use it in so many situations.
It's having the honesty for asking for help, but also if you see someone struggling, asking if they need any help from you.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the bit where it starts to get a bit uncomfortable for some, isn't it? You know, I don't necessarily want to open up about my mental health challenges because of the stigmas associated with it. You know, these words here that are still lying around on the floor, but a lot of them were quite negative, and you can understand why. I was on the telly. I was really pleased. I was on the telly on Saturday and Sunday. I wrote into BBC Newswatch because I was really annoyed with the way that they reported and keep reporting everything that every national security incident or the chap that left the bomb on the tube recently. They lead with so-and-so who has Asperger's and then didn't explain it, when there's a terrorist attack, they always say they're investigating the individual's mental health, but they don't explain that. I mean, yes, they might actually ultimately work out there's a contributory factor, but my beef was, you don't say so-and-so who's a woman has done this, or so-and-so who's black did that, and this is that language thing. We're talking about responsible reporting. So I went off on one. My wife said to me, she said, "You happy now, Victor?" And I went, "Yes, I got it off my chest." And then in the morning I walked in with my phone. I said, they got back to me on a video, and they're going to wear it at the weekend. How like those apples? And she was like, "Oh, right, okay, fine." So I put that on video, and I wasn't the only one to say that, actually. Yeah, so it's more responsible reporting. You want PR, right? Can we influence this? Yeah. Right. So what can businesses do? Come on, let's get into the crux of this. So we can spot it, we can do stuff, be flexible.
Make it easier to get help.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yes?
I was just going to say that our data matches the mind data at Rocket Park in a survey we do each year. This last year we asked specific questions around mental health, and about 60% of people said they would be happy to talk to a peer, so the importance of having some kind of buddy, someone that you can talk to. But interestingly, people reported a much lower percentage of being comfortable with the idea of talking to your boss, which I guess everyone in the room can identify with for lots of different reasons. But for that reason, I guess what we can actively do is help people to have those delicate conversations. And I think companies to ask, what would it take to equip people to be able to have those conversations.
Brilliant. We have one more here.
I was just going to say, I think managers can just do really simple things, just as like ask people how they're doing, just in general. When you come in the morning, just have a chat with somebody, and if you see them being a bit down, and you think you're a bit quiet, just ask them if they're okay in a place where they can talk if they want to. And I think sometimes you accept when someone says they're okay when clearly you can see that they're not, because you're actually a little bit relieved maybe, and you walk away, and actually if you can see that and you feel that quite strongly that they're not, then take them somewhere where they can, if they want to, tell you more.
Absolutely, just be human, right?
Yeah.
I'd say have a very clear policy, and a policy that's positively put forward. Even those statements that you sometimes see on there, at least it says at the foundational level that this is something which your organisation supports. So you're not just at the whim of whether you have a supportive manager or you have a supportive colleague. It's actually embedded in the culture.
I was fortunate enough to be at Spotify's HQ 6 months ago, and they've got stuff all over the walls to say we just embrace difference of all types, and if you feel that someone is being negative or derogatory towards you, go straight to HR. It was an absolute culture. It's an amazing organisation, and they really nailed it. Fantastic. So I just wanted to kind of summarise a few bits, because we've got a few more minutes just to go. Why we did this, unconscious bias. Yeah, some of that language, it kind of comes through. It's not helpful, obviously, if we're having a negative thought around all this stuff and we're talking about it negatively. But it does exist out there, but we can make a conscious effort to address that. Certainly in recruitment processes. So some great examples of how to overcome unconscious bias in the recruitment days. But it does exist. Difference is awesome. Let's leave knowing that difference is good. If you get loads of the same people in a room offering the same stuff, you're going to get the same answers, and they're a bit dull. Yeah. If you have difference, and I've got a raft of difference that I bring into situations, and you will too, you get much better outcomes. This compassion thing, look out for yourself, yeah, and look out for others. It's interesting, I was talking about, it's normally the group HR director or the head of wellbeing that's responsibility for looking after the thousands of people in the organisation, but no one really thinks about them and who looks after them. It might be those individuals that have difficulties and struggles as well. Yeah, sometimes it is the CEO. There are all kinds of stories about CEOs having difficulties, and they're the ones that might have been strong and lead. They shouldn't have a problem. So let's really be compassionate. Education, absolutely critical. you mentioned a patron of the Shoreline Foundation because they're doing some amazing work. They did the Education UK campaign to get the petition for compulsory mental health training education in schools, and they got 103,000 signatures against the tide of the deadline reducing by 2 months because of the snap election. It was like, what are we going to do? And collectively we pulled it off. And I think what would have been really helpful for me, so again, maybe a message to take away, get behind the campaign possibly, is as a child, when I was thinking of dying of AIDS or I was having a problem with mushrooms, if I'd had a little bit of education to know that wasn't quite right and I should maybe go here or have this conversation, yeah, or I'd have flagged it up and someone had gone, actually that's not right, and I might not have had as many difficulties in the years between 10 and 32. That's why it's really important to me and others that are part of this, is, you know, let's educate kids about this whole stuff, you know, in a language that computes, so that they can spot this stuff nice and early. We're talking about millennials and the fact that they are inquisitive and they are learning this stuff, and I think we're on the right path. But at a very, very young age, I think it's really important. I just think generally it's a personal issue, it's a business issue, it's an organisation issue to really, really support people, but then start going down this path of leveraging this. So a great event this morning where they were talking about some organisations are still really closed, CEOs, CFOs, it's kind of like, no, not interested in that subject matter at all. But what you can do when you start talking about increases of productivity of individuals by looking after their well-being, yeah, when you can start talking about positive outcomes because you're embracing difference, you've got to make a few little changes, but we get better outcomes, then that's the kind of language that they like, especially if there's pounds, dollars and cents and whatever associated with it. So, you know, I urge people to kind of think around the subject matter as well, not just talk about how difference is good, but talk about how it can maybe impact on bottom line, if that's the conversation that's going to get your investment in this over the line. Yeah? So, very, very quickly, a lot of people sometimes ask what we do as a business, and I'll whiz around. This is one of the models I created. Education, obviously, I talk about that at schools, but I think employers seem to have the responsibility, of doing this education, and wonderful organisations like mine and others are kind of doing this education piece, but maybe we should have been doing that a little bit earlier at school, but I think we all have a responsibility for that. Normalising this conversation, yeah, running events like this, but events within organisations to get people to open up. But this one, for me, comes with a health warning, and everyone I work with, I say, look, you must, this is my risk radar coming in, it's like, what's going to happen, Mr. Client, when 3 people come up to me at the end and say, well, thanks for sharing, I've got this, I've had a difficulty with that, or they'll email me subsequently, or they'll go to the HR department, they're not equipped and prepared for that to happen. And it does happen. I'm talking to a lot of people. I say can't be your counsellor, because I'm not equipped, not worried about it. But I do help people out. And then I point them back to their HR department, and I already prime the HR department, this is going to happen after your lunch and learn. I can cast iron guarantee it will happen. We do lots of alignment stuff and strategy, so mental wellbeing, people strategy, and then business strategy. So going back to what I said earlier, get it in the language of the CEO and the CFO if they're not as aligned as the HR department on this subject matter, then you can kind of get it all done and can make everyone happy by showing that doing this over here is actually having a massive impact over there. Business case in it, how do you deliver this, how much is it going to cost so you get that investment, going live to support the people with it, and then the evaluation piece is, you know, where's the needle gone from? We started here with absenteeism, we started here with presenteeism, we started here with employee engagement. We've done all this intervention, it's ended up here, therefore return on investment flows back, and CEO's happy, we invest more, etc, etc, etc. So, I'm not going to ask you to trash the floor anymore, I've got enough to clean up after you lot. But I'd like to just run that by you again, that kind of word mental. I just wonder if you've got other thoughts now, other thoughts about it. We had crazy, scary.
Crazy good? In a good way? In a happy way?
Happy crazy?
Happy crazy?
Yeah. Okay. I'll take that as a positive movement of the needle, yeah.
diversity, because you mentioned about diversity of
Yeah.
thought.
Complex.
Absolutely.
Complex.
Complex. Yeah, it is complex.
Creative.
Creative. Yes. You look right. Creative types. Yeah.
Opportunity.
Yeah.
Opportunity to do things and differently and think a different way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's brilliant to think differently.
Friends.
Friends.
Yes. Because your friends might have mental issues, and now and you could be in a better place now to be open to them.
Yeah.
And actually say, I can be there to support you. Whereas before you kind of shut off to any signals they might be sending out that they need help.
Brilliant. Yeah, it's really compassionate.
Cool. I think it's enabling sort of people to talk about mental difference of a certain kind. I think it enables other conversations that are even more difficult. So, for example, people talking about depression versus people talking about schizophrenia. It's a different order of magnitude in a way. Sometimes being able to get people comfortable with talking about depression will help in terms of conversations about other mental health challenges as well.
Create the right environment to open up and right environment, safe environment to open up, have these conversations. Yeah, brilliant. So, you can influence this, can't you? Because you're the PR experts of certainly the UK, possibly the world. So in the language that you're using, in the kind of the work you're doing with clients, and someone mentioned working with Daily Mail and things like that, have you got an opportunity that you can start to change the language a bit? What do you think? Is a request for me, if you consider that.
The Daily Mail are orange themselves.
Yeah. What? But you said you like challenge, didn't you? Yeah. No, but can you do things? Can you word things differently? Can you take, what messages will you take from this session today? What tweets will you put out tonight? And what will you do to cover this?
I think we need to be kind to each other as an industry. We're actually quite unforgiving sometimes because we're at such a pace and we expect so much of ourselves and of each other to an extent. So I think it's kind of, we could do with just saying it's okay to stop or to be nerdy or to not answer emails after a certain time, setting better boundaries maybe.
Michael, aren't we the most unproductive country but work the most hours? Brilliant. Brilliant. Excellent. Maybe it'll change when we leave Europe, I don't know.
I hope so.
Excellent.
Can I just
There we go. So
thank you.
questions?
That was absolutely fascinating. Can we give kind of